Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Executives, and Eccentrics, a podcast dedicated to the stories, strategies, and secrets of remarkable individuals. Join us as we engage in enlightening conversations with intriguing entrepreneurs, accomplished executives, and fascinating eccentrics, exploring their journeys, triumphs, and unconventional wisdom that has shaped their success. Get ready to meet John Mason Smith, aka JMS, founder of HireWith. As a key player in Paylocity's rise to IPO and the mastermind behind Astro Payroll Services, JMS redefined the game by pioneering blockchain payroll solutions with Signature Bank. Known for turning bold ideas into industry-shaking realities, JMS is the ultimate innovator in a high-stakes world. Welcome, John Mason Smith, JMS for short. Tell me who you are and what you do.
Sure. I am the owner of HireWith.us. It's HireWith. Oh man, I already messed up. Do you like this?
You're fine. You're fine. Hit it.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm the owner of HireWith. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been a sales guy my whole career. I've been coaching salespeople on how to be their best version of themselves. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today, Scott.
Excellent. So HireWith is, we had talked before, and it occurred to me a couple things after our conversation. It was along the lines of HireWith is nothing of what I thought originally kind of thought it was, and it's this kind of higher level meta thinking. In order to come up with actually make it happen, you have to lean into a couple of things that are really just conceptual. Can you kind of tell us what HireWith does and kind of what you do as a service?
Yeah. So very high level, HireWith, we are talent scouts for the payroll and PEO industry. And if you're not in the payroll and PEO industry, or even if you're not in the staffing industry, some of those words might not have made any sense. So I think it helps to kind of contextualize, because I'm a little bit of a storyteller. So if it's okay, I'll rewind and give you some context. My life is, I grew up with a sales rep as a father. I was watching him drive me to school, making calls, as we going down the road. And I was in college and I thought, okay, I want to be a CEO. I want to own something. That was what I was telling myself in college, to the point where I actually started a computer repair company, just going and fixing people's computers. I called it Frankenstein PC Repair. We bring your PC back from the dead, was the idea. Just put flyers up around campus. I'd go and I'd put a, pirated copy of Windows on their computer to reinstall it, and then, take $50
welcome.
And call it a day. Yeah. It was like, however you had to do it, right? I didn't know what I was doing, right? I was just trying to get the computer working again. And so I said, I'm going to be a CEO. And I decided to do that right out of college. And I was in an entrepreneurship class at the University of Alabama. And one of the professors stood up and said, if you want to make a lot of money, just go into sales. But if you really want to be a CEO or blah, 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 and he said something. And I tuned out, because after he said, do you want to make a lot of money, go into sales? I changed my mind and decided to go into sales. So it's that's why I'm here, right? That's why I'm in school. So I ended up taking a job out of college with a little company called Paychex, if you know those guys, selling payroll. So knocking on doors in this case, I was in the Tampa, Florida region, knocking on doors of small business owners and trying to convince them that they should process payroll with Paychex. And I did that for about 2 years. And then my wife looked at me one day and said, hey, I miss my family. I want to go back to Virginia. So we packed up and moved to Virginia. Paychex didn't want to transfer me. ADP, their competitor, offered me a job on the spot. I took it. And then before my first day, it was literally, I was supposed to fly out for training. And this little startup I'd never heard of called Paylocity said, well, why don't we hire you? We'll pay you more money to do the same job. And I said, sold. And they were like, by the way, you're going to be the only employee in the state, and your boss is going to be 10 hours away, and you'll see him once a quarter. Good luck with that. I was like, perfect. Leave me alone and I'll go close deals, right? So I ended up being the first rep for Paylocity, and I was with them as they became a publicly traded company and spent about 8 years
big.
there.
Paylocity
They're huge now. Yeah, they weren't very big when I got there. It's funny because as a sales rep, selling into a market where you've got no existing customers, people ask for references, and you're like, what do I say?
Or guidance in your case, right? You were kind of left to your own devices a little bit, right? You're like, hey,
a lot of it.
Go crush it however you see fit. Is kind of what it sounds like what the marketing orders were.
Yeah. And so I did my best. I struggled the first year, but they didn't have time to really get on to me because they were trying to grow like crazy and they had all this money to hire a big sales team. Second year, I did well. And then third year and onward, I was selling double my quota every year. And basically, it got to a point where the company became publicly traded and the culture started to shift. And they're still a great company. I still hold a lot of stock there. I have nothing bad to say about Paylocity. But I knew it was time for me to get into, I wanted to work for another startup, because Paylocity, when I got there, was a startup. They had that startup vibe, that startup culture. And somebody convinced me, actually not somebody, I called a competitor of Paylocity that I knew in my local market, like a guy that just owned a payroll company, which I didn't know you could do. But I called him and I said, hey, can I just like sell for you under your logo, and I can just make a residual? Because payroll salespeople don't get a residual. They eat what they kill. They're bird dogging deals, despite the product being recurring revenue. So the guy looked at me and said, well, it sounds like you just want to own your own payroll company. Have you considered just starting a payroll company? I was like, no. And he's like, well, here's how you do it. Here's the vendors you need, and here's some people you should look into. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. So I left my job at Paylocity and I started Astra Payroll Services, basically just winging it, man, just figuring it out. And the thing about being a payroll company is you really only need three things. You need some kind of website to process payroll, right? You need a payroll technology, obviously, to sell. You need some way to pay the taxes. I brought in a tax vendor. I could have hired some people and done a lot of work, but instead I just paid a tax vendor. And then you need a way to move the money around, right? Like a bank. And the third one, the bank, is the riskiest part, because in the payroll industry, if I take money from Scott and I pay it to your 5 employees, I'm just making up a scenario here. If you're bad for the money, the bank treats the debit and the credit, the payment and the collection, as two separate events. So if you don't have the money, my bank will still pay your employees, but now I owe my bank all that money immediately, and it's a problem, right? So typically what happens is, they'll float it for a couple of days while they try to do a reverse or whatever, right? But the bank's not having a good time. So when you sign up for someone to move the money, there are these specialized vendors that sell to payroll companies called ACH processors, and they are bonded and insured. They have an insurance policy. The one I went with was called Cachet, and they had a $50 million insurance policy for fraud. And so I thought I was good to go. So we were like 6 months into this, having a good time. I brought on like 20 clients, 15, 20 clients, something like that. And then it was like October 2019. And I get a call while I'm on a sales presentation. I get a call from one of my customers. John, you took the money out of my account, but my employees don't see it. I said, well, let me look into this. So I call my bank, and it is an out of service tone. not like ring to voicemail, like, this number's not in service, right? What happened is somebody committed something like $60 million worth of fraud. It was an amount that was above their insurance policy. It was a company called My Payroll HR, to give them a look if you want to read some crazy drama. And that day I had to deliver paper checks off of my operating account to all of the employees that we owed money to. Now, we had enough money to float it, because thank God I was just starting. Could you imagine if I had $20 million worth of money floating out that day? And I was listening to another podcast. If you ever listen to Planet Money from NPR, it's a great podcast. I love it.
Yes, of course.
And they were, shout out to NPR. But the Planet Money podcast, they were talking about blockchain technology. And they said, it's funny. It seems like if you put the word blockchain in front of anything, people just throw money at you. And I said, oh, I'm going to start something with blockchain. I don't know what. So I went home after I delivered this. And I started Googling, I knew that in my payroll system, when I went to process my money movements, the tab was labeled cash management. So I Googled blockchain cash management, and I found 2 banks that had a confusing article about blockchain cash management. One was Chase Bank and one was Signature Bank. I called Chase Bank because they're huge, right? And I said, hey, what if I use this for payroll? And they said, JMS, that's a great idea. If you use this for payroll, all you have to do is hire a developer. We'll send you the API specifications. You can raise a few $1 million. You can start a business on the backs of our bank. I said, all right, not going to do that. I called the other bank. It was funny. It was a Forbes article, and I called the front desk. I just called the customer service line. And on the article, they quoted a guy named Greg Tamberlane, who I love Greg. He's fantastic. So I called the front desk and I said, can I get transferred to Greg? And somehow I ended up on this guy's cell phone as he's driving home to pick up his kids, right? And I said, hey, could I use your blockchain technology for payroll? And he said, well, we actually don't work with payroll companies. And I said, well, you should, right? And so he ended up saying, well, fly up to New York. So I flew up to New York. I sat down with him and his team. I told him my idea. And he said, this is interesting. We're going to bring you on why don't we bring you on for like a little test run? So he brought me on like a 3-week contract to go out and sell this concept for 3 weeks, just to see what happens. And it didn't have, it was like a flat fee just so I had some claim. I didn't even look at the agreement. I probably should have looked at it in more detail. And I called the biggest payroll company I knew, which was Paychex, because I'd worked for them. Like, ADP's bigger, but I knew some people at Paychex. And I begged a friend of mine. I said, hey, who should I talk to? Next thing you know, I end up on a call with this guy from the board of directors of Paychex. And I tell him my idea. And obviously, it was blowing the mind of the Signature Bank guys that they're on the phone with this giant payroll company that moves trillions of dollars, right? And I give them my idea. I want to use blockchain technology in place of ACH to mitigate ACH risk, right? And they say no. But the reason they say no is, John, this sounds like a great idea, but we walk away from ideas that make us millions of dollars all the time because we're busy working on ideas that make us tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. But so call us when it's a real product. And I hung up. I said, Greg, what do you think? And he said, well, he just said this was $1 million project. He said he was happy to make we'd make millions of dollars. Like, this is great. So, I negotiated a longer contract with them, and it ended up being so lucrative that I sold my payroll company just to consult them on this technology. And then you fast forward, we were selling to payroll company owners this idea that instead of using this risky thing that everyone just got burned on, we would instead use this bank's real-time blockchain payroll system as an alternative. It was completely free. I got commission on the dollars that went through the bank. It was genius, right? And so it was driving a lot of depositors to this bank that had big bank balances, and then they were referring all their customers to this bank. It was great. They loved it. But the bank looked at me and said, John, we have to open new bank accounts for every customer that comes in. We're drowning in implementation. Why don't you stop selling for a while and we'll just keep paying you?
Okay. Okay.
And I had already sold my payroll company. So now I'm sitting around going, okay, what do I have? I have a digital Rolodex of a ton of payroll company owners. And I know a lot of them have decided to sell after Cache collapsed. And I've got time and someone funding me to sit around and do nothing. So I decided I had this idea, which was mergers and acquisitions. When people decide to sell a payroll company, they usually sell a multiple of the top line revenue. Like, if you make $1 million a year, you could sell it for 2x and make $2 million up front, right? That's the idea. If you're a small payroll company, in 2020 or whenever this really was happening, the average multiple for a small sub $1 million payroll company was like 2x. But if you were like a $10 million payroll company, you could get 3 or even 4x, right? So I said, why don't I take a bunch of $1 million payroll companies and put them together in a spreadsheet and sell them all at once to get that 4x for everyone? And then I'll take something off the top for myself for the trouble, right? And so that began my roll-up acquisition, which I called Astra Acquisitions, because I'm not very creative and my payroll company was Astra Payroll. And I called all the people I knew that were frustrated. And I said, what's your magic number? How much money would someone have to offer you for you to say, screw it, I'm out? Not, are you selling? Not, are you ready to retire? It was, what's the magic number? And I got this spreadsheet and I had all of them sign an agreement that said, if you get me this magic number, then I will walk away, right? But otherwise, I'm not, and so these were, I was going after passive sellers. And then I was calling these private equity companies and ADP and Paychex acquisition departments. And I was saying, hey, how much is the best number you'd pay for a book of 20 million? I'm putting it together. Give me your best offer, right? And pre-selling it, right? So this was going, I got maybe like $7-8 million of top line revenue gathered together on a spreadsheet. And some of these guys were under contract. Some of them I was still negotiating with. And then one day, one of my big customers called me and said, hey, John, I heard in the news that there might be something going on in the banking sector. There's this Silicon Valley bank out in California that looks like they're not doing so hot. Is Signature Bank okay? And I said, absolutely. They're fine. I called Greg, my good buddy. Greg, how's the bank? Doing great, right? I didn't know. So then on Sunday, a news alert comes out. Signature Bank collapsing. And then Monday, the bank's gone. That's how quick it happened. And the FDIC decided to sell the assets of the bank, shut down my project. I never saw another dime from the bank from that moment on. And I will say, I felt very proud of how I negotiated my contract with Signature Bank. I found a retired banker and I said, look, can you negotiate my compensation completely on my behalf? I'll pay you whatever I end up paying my attorney to write up the contract. And he said, sure. So this guy that negotiated my contract, I got to look up his name. He was fantastic. He's like, just as long as the calls aren't on Wednesday, because that's when I golf, right? So he came in and he negotiated my contract because I didn't know what a banker should get paid. And as part of it, there was a golden parachute, which I'd never had in my life. And a golden parachute means that if they fire me for any reason, I still get paid for a year. And the reason why was because I wasn't giving equity in the bank. If they fired me, they could just stop paying me, right? So we needed a reason that if I get too much money, like if I started earning too much money, we didn't want to encourage them to fire me. Because like imagine my commission was like, it wasn't, but imagine my commission got up to like $1 million a month. Wow, they could make $20 million by firing me right now, right? By not paying that for the next 20 months. So the golden parachute was to prevent that. And it was a 12-month guaranteed payout, right? So I was like, I assumed that no matter what happened, I had 12 months to get my life together. But I didn't account for the bank failing to exist one day. So the bank fails to exist, everything shuts down. And I looked back and I said, okay, well, while I was running my roll-up acquisition, this question kept coming up, which is, what's going to happen to my staff? Now, when I shut down my payroll company, I had to let a few people go, and it was unfortunate. One of them filed unemployment. The other ones must have found work somewhere else, right? But when I was running my payroll company, I distinctly recall meeting with a gentleman who had sold his payroll company a couple of years prior. Of course, you find someone like that in the wild. You want to talk to him, tell me your story, right? And when I met him, I had asked him a question. I said, hey, which employees did you really like? And he said, well, these three, call them. And I went out and I called them. I said, hey, what's the chance you want to come work for me? You used to work for this guy who sold his payroll company using the same technology I use. Remember, I said there were 3 vendors you need to run a payroll company: a tax vendor, an ACH like bank vendor, and a payroll technology vendor. Well, he had people that knew my technology. So I said, well, this is great. Maybe when I do this roll-up acquisition at the very end, I'll take all the staff getting let go and I'll find them jobs with all of my friends who run the same software that are just like, this is plug and play. Because there's a school for payroll and accounting. There's a school for HR. There is no school to learn UKG Ready. There is no school to learn iSolve. There's no school for Prism. These are really industry specific software stacks that you can only learn by working at these companies. And so I that was the idea. So HireWith ended up being inspired by this idea that when someone buys or sells a payroll company, we have this really valuable asset that's not being sold, which is these people that have industry software specific knowledge that you cannot find anywhere else. And the problem that you run into with like a recruiter is that a recruiter finds candidates by calling into these companies and convincing their staff to quit. Well, if you're friends with the other licensees who use, let's go with iSolved for a minute, they all see each other maybe 3 times a year. They'll see each other at the iSolve conference. They'll see each other at the IPPA or TPG conferences. They call each other in the support forums to help with problems. I can't figure this out. I'll call this other CEO who uses the same software and he'll help me. So could you imagine if you're like talking to a friend of yours like that, and then it's like, oh, by the way, I'm also poaching your favorite employee, you know? That just ruins your reputation. So the idea of HireWith was, how do we passively keep this talent from leaving the market and rehome them without being a recruiter, without calling into and convincing people to quit? And so that was the impetus. And so the day Signature Bank collapsed was the day we launched HireWith. And so, I talked about this idea of being eternally in the niches. Like, this is such a niche within a niche, but there's no competition here. And there are people that are maybe substitutes, like a recruiter or a job board. But if you want to get a phone call the second a competitor of yours sells and is going to lay off 5 people who know exactly all the systems you use, I'm the only source for that. Right. And the only reason I could do this was because I had a spreadsheet of 700 payroll companies that I had interacted with over the previous 3 years.
Your wall is so high. You know? Your wall is so high. No one's coming after your business model, because it can't be done, because you'd have to have 5 years experience knowing these people and kind of the process and everything along with it. I also love the fact that, every part of your story requires that you have the bravery to pick the phone up, right? Requires that you have the think on your feet, right? To call 20 people who you don't know, which, by the way, is for the average human is, I'd rather get a root canal. I mean, I'm pretty good at it, but most would rather get a root canal than do that, right? So yeah. It's almost like kind of, we were talking earlier about how sales is a superpower, right? It sounds like that's kind of how you're going to transition kind of into this next thing you're kind of thinking of. Let's kind of cover that here for a bit. So now you have, So now you've got this as HireWith. It's obviously doing very, very well. And now it seems like you're going to your next thing. Let's talk about that just for a moment.
Yeah. So one of the things there's 2 things I'm working on right now. One of them is available now. One of them's coming later, right? The thing that was the natural evolution, because, the reality is we're all on a journey. No one's sitting still. Even if you feel like life is stable, it's not. It's going to change. It's inevitable. One of the evolutions of this was when people sold their payroll companies. We found that a lot of people wanted to retire, and then they retire and they'd be bored. And so we started the HireWith freelance marketplace. We're basically doing Upwork, but for this very industry specific niche. That's all it is. It's a tiny, you want to be a retired payroll expert that knows UKG ready? Great. Hop on and help someone for 3 hours, on a weekday when you're bored. That's one thing that we just launched, right? The other thing is as my business requires less of my time, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is sales coaching. I grew up in a sales environment, literally watching my father sell, and then I did it myself for years and years, and I'm still doing it now. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about is this concept. I've been referring to it as sticky niches, right? The idea that you can really make a lot of money by finding a niche that you live within. And the only people equipped to do it are not the folks who know information. It's the folks who are willing, to your point, to pick up the phone and call others. I've met so many salespeople who are exceptional salespeople, and they fail. They fail. They have a job and they can't close deals. And the reason why is because the product they're selling is a bad product, or the company supporting it is a bad company, or the product they're selling into, the market they're selling into is saturated, right? And the question I keep coming back to is, why do some bad sales reps succeed and some good sales reps fail? So a great example I think about in this vein here is back when Tesla was like really hot. Tesla's still doing well, obviously, but there was a time when, you literally couldn't buy a Tesla. There was like a waiting list, right? If you were a bad sales rep at a Tesla dealer, do you think these people were struggling to convince people to buy Teslas? There's a waiting list. There's a line around the corner. Imagine being a bad sales rep at an iPhone store back when iPhone launched. You know what I mean?
You'd be fine. You'd be just fine.
There are bad sales reps who do great. And it's not because, and so what I'm thinking about is how many people out there are good salespeople that are failing because of the product or the company they're selling for. And the idea of sticky niches is to take another view and say, if you've got the most valuable part of this equation, which is, to your point, the superpower of being able to pick up a phone and have an uncomfortable conversation, and if that goes poorly, to not lose the confidence to pick up the phone again and call someone else, you can sell either within your own existing product line, you can find a corner of the world to make your own, or if you're feeling really bold, you could start your own thing like I did. It's really not that hard. Everything I did to this point and continue to do is just the logical next step when you're thinking like an entrepreneur. And you can be an entrepreneur within a sales organization. When I sold for Paychex, they released a product called the PST 1000. What a terrible, no offense to Paychex, that's a terrible name for a product, right? The PST 1000. Yeah, the Paychex
I left
time.
Paychex for ADP because of the horrors of this is like years ago though, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was 2011, I want to say. The PST 1000 is a time clock. You take it out of a box, you stick it on the wall, you plug it into your router, and it was its own computer and its own server. It was not cloud-based. The cloud was in the box, right? And what that meant was when you plug that thing in, you had to do this thing where you go into a router and you open the port so people can punch in, right? Yeah. And the thing is the support was, here's your time clock in a box, good luck, goodbye, right? Now, remember, what did I do prior to my job at Paychex? I had my little computer repair thing, right? So I know a thing or two about computers. I'm not an expert, but I knew enough. So I went to all the guys in the Paychex office when they launched this, and I said, look, I'll make a deal with all of you. You guys go out and sell these time clocks. Give me half the commission. Give me half the credit. Split the commission with me. I'll go set it up so they actually keep the freaking time clocks. So I started driving around Tampa, setting up time clocks for my colleagues as they closed these deals in exchange for half the commission on the time clock. So I became the time clock guy. I was killing it. Made a lot of money doing that, And that's what I mean. Like, you can become an expert. And it's simple. You just start with this idea of like, what do I already know? What am I an expert on, right? It's this concept of finding these problems that are, and in my mind, I think about it as three things. You want to find problems in your world that are endemic, right? Expensive and established. So when we talk about endemic, it means everyone in your environment has the same problem. Everyone in this office couldn't set up the frickin' time clocks. It's established because it's being pushed by corporate. It's not going away. It's not like a flash in the pan kind of thing that's not worth putting energy into. And in this case, it was expensive because my sales rep colleagues were losing money when these deals weren't working out. And then we talk about bringing in out of industry, bringing in, experts that can bring another perspective on this. I happen to be an IT guy in a sales job in that moment. So I happen to be that, but often you can bring in third parties. I could have, if I really felt entrepreneurial, could have hired a local IT guy to do this for me. I didn't have to do it myself. Right. And then all you have to be is the glue that brings that together, and you can invoice for it. You know what I mean? So the same thing applies to HireWith. At the end of the day, finding staff in the payroll industry is an established problem that's been a problem for ages. It's endemic in the sense that literally every payroll company I talk to is short-staffed, and they have to hire and train people, and they all hate it. And it's expensive because when you don't have the right talent, you lose clients. And by the way, when it's expensive, they're willing to pay for it. That's why it's important, right? Someone's got to be losing money because this problem's not been solved. And the out-of-industry experts I brought in were the people selling their payroll companies, right? These were the people that knew all about it. I didn't know anything about staffing or recruiting, but I knew people, or I knew how to find people that were about to create this product. And all I'm doing is connecting the dots. I'm just being the glue that connects it, right? And you look at Signature Bank, and not to prattle on anymore, but I will say with Signature Bank, I don't know anything about banking. I don't know anything about ACH beyond what I've been taught. I didn't do the work at Signature Bank of creating a blockchain real-time transfer system. I didn't do any of that. I just knew enough to connect the right people together and be the glue in between it and send an invoice. And that's what salespeople are great at, But the problem is everyone gets stuck saying, my glue is going to be the company I work for right now. And, my solution, I'm going to go out and find my own. You can cultivate,
You're kind of special though, because you know how they say nature hates a vacuum? Entrepreneurs love a vacuum, right? When there's this empty space, you're running toward the danger to go solve the problem, right? And that's where the money is. And as I hear you talk, that's kind of where you've made your whole career, is running toward the vacuum, running toward the lack of support, or the shitty version of something that simply needs a little bit of glue to go make it work. You're running toward that.
So I'll throw out some other little examples in my life when this has happened. I talk about my successes, but I think it's worth talking about my failures just for a second too, because I've launched plenty of stuff that failed. All right. Heck, you could argue that instant payroll at Signature Bank was a failure because the bank collapsed. Although I would argue the product wasn't the failure. The bank had a set of unfortunate events. But in terms of I think the website's still up, but I used to have a company that I called Partly Proper. So I had a manager come in, and I won't name this manager. I had a number of managers at Paylocity, but one of my managers really, the rest of the sales team wasn't having as much luck as I was. And they started to do this thing that I hate. When your manager at a sales organization says you need to be on a video call Monday morning and Friday afternoon, and every day we're checking in until you hit your freaking numbers, right? And I was pretty salty about it because I was hitting my numbers. Why am I getting punished? So I thought it would be funny to take a suit that I had and send it off to my mother, who's retired. And I said, Mom, can you cut out the back of this suit and put Velcro strips down it? And so Monday morning, I'd wake up, roll out of bed, slip my arms into this suit, Velcro the back, do my sales call. And then 6 weeks later, one day I said, all right, guys, I'll see you later. And I just ripped it off. And it was hilarious. And I did it because it was funny. But then I had the idea man, this is actually really convenient. I hate to admit it. I did a number of sales calls wearing that thing, where I had a Zoom call and I just didn't feel like putting on a suit because I had one meeting in front of a human, Thursdays were our telemarketing days. I'm on the phone all morning. And then I had 2 WebExes. I'm not going to put on a suit and iron clothes. I had this thing hanging up in the closet I could slip on, and so I thought, this could be an idea. So I if you go to the website, I don't think it's up anymore, but it was called Partly Proper is what I came up with. Partlyproper.com. Partly Proper presents the half suit. You can't buy this product. Don't get excited. I got a patent pending on this Velcro triangle design. And the idea was I had 2 triangles of Velcro on the back of it, so I could close it myself without my wife having to help. That was it, right? And I said, I started a Kickstarter to create the half suit. And the idea is I was going to sell it to call centers. I was going to sell it to campuses of colleges.
Here's the thing. I kind of remember this, to be honest with you. I kind of remember this a little bit. I want to say that I have seen this, or I have seen your Kickstarter, or were you advertising on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that?
No. So here's the secret
Reddit?
about
Possibly Reddit?
I was on Reddit.
I did see this.
It went viral on Reddit.
I absolutely saw this. It was a couple of years ago, though, wasn't it? Yeah, that's.
Oh yeah, it was a couple of years, and it failed hard. I did this before I started the Signature Bank thing. So the reason it failed, by the way, I think is really interesting, and I'll talk about it. But the thing that I'll point out is let's talk about life. One reason it failed right off the bat was the fact that I made it too corporate. I had a friend that did marketing. I said, make this look professional. And it looked professional. And people were like, where's the personal story? Where's like, I feel like I'm just giving money to Google. Like, this is too professional. Like, if I had stood up and said, hey, I'm John Mason Smith and I'm a sales rep and I'm tired of waking up for sales calls, so I made this thing, I think I would have gotten a lot more traction. I wasn't honest. The other thing that made it fail was the day I launched it. I chose a price point of $99 a half suit, right? And the day I launched it, the top comment on that Reddit post was, hey, H&M has a full suit for $99. Right. And then like,
pain in the ass to put on though. It sucks to put on. I feel like the story would have been, if you simply would have like line in the sand, this is how I got here. I don't know. I think it would have crushed it.
Well, what really would have killed it is if I had waited until COVID and everybody suddenly was working from home, but I didn't know COVID was coming. And, the other interesting thing about the half suit concept, the thing about the half suit concept is that it is not unique. Everyone, I think I Googled and I actually hired a patent attorney just to do some research on it. The idea of a Velcro backed suit is not new, but no one's bothered to patent it. And in fact, it was a patent pending. I let it expire. You guys that are listening can go out and do this instead, right? The reality is there was a skit on Jimmy Kimmel where I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, where he had a Velcro suit, right? There's plenty of rip away suit gags, right? So this idea is in the ether, but no one claimed it and connected the two parties of this, right? Buyers and sellers, and made it a product, right? So, I mean, that failed miserably, but I did it with play money. I took a commission check from Paylocity while I was working there. And I said to my wife, I was like, hey, can this be my play money for this stupid idea? And she said, yeah, you can lose all that money. And I did a good job losing that money. I had a company called connectmeplease.xyz, which I won't go into too much other than to say it was an idea I had as a sales rep at Paylocity. I said, we're all selling into the same CEOs. What if someone just like had a secret database you could subscribe to that's like, here's the phone numbers of all the people I know that I'm telling marketing to. That evolved in something I call the collaborative lead list, which I still do to this day. The idea of a collaborative lead list is you go to a trade show or conference and you lean over to the guy at the trade show booth next to you that doesn't compete against you. And you say, hey, I'll show you yours. I'll show you mine if you show me yours. All right, let's trade lists here. Right. I mean, I'm here. Here's my lead list. Here's all the business owners I know. Who's all the business owners you know, right? Like, why not, right? We're not competing against each other directly. We might as well support each other. We're both paying $20,000 to be at this stupid conference. We might as well get something out of it. But that's what I was imagining, like a formalized version of that, and it ended up failing. I had another one.
Hold on a second, real quick, James.
Yeah, I'm just going on and on about failed businesses.
No, that's where Zoom Info. I swear to you, there was a enter a lead, get a lead years ago. It was prior to COVID. And what you could do is you could enter the email address, first name, last name, title, company, and then you could get one out basically for free. I want to say that's where Zoom Info came from. I may be wrong on that on the title, but I used that for years to go find. I was just gonna take my my email and go through and go, okay, I'll trade IBM for Microsoft or whatever. And it was, you were onto something, but you didn't execute.
I was onto something. Well, and I will say, the difference was mine was for phone extensions. It was specifically phone extensions at big corporate hotlines. Like the phone extension for the CEO is 1785. Like, how do you get that out into the world? Emails were easier to find. And I will say, I think a lot about my older brother. When I was in middle school, my older brother one day at the breakfast table said to me, hey, what if our shoes had roller skates in them? What if you could just like flip out a payroll? No, this was before wheelies. He said, wouldn't that be amazing? And here's the thing, Scott. You know how many kids had that idea? I'm sure millions of kids have sat around the breakfast table and said, man, I wish I could just pop wheels out of my shoes and be on roller skates. But somebody, and I should probably know who, but somebody went out, got a design patent, found a manufacturer, put this together and sold it and made millions, right? And the reality is I hate to say this, but the ideas themselves are not the valuable part of this equation.
So let's put a pin on that just for a second. So my wife and I go back on this all the time. The idea, I get asked 3 times a year to sign an NDA. I will never sign an NDA for your grinder for cats or whatever bullshit idea someone has, right?
There's no point.
Oh, there's no point, right? Because execution is 99% of the value add is execution. The idea. So anybody listening, your idea is not special. I promise it's not. It's execution is where the money is made or where the value is added.
Well, and that's where I go into that 4-step process that I am at some point going to formalize into this sticky niches thing. But the idea is really simple. What do you know? It's this idea of, find those problems that are obviously endemic, expensive, and established. And by the way, the most important part of this is to give up quickly and find another problem to solve. Right? The people that get in their heads about this one, I meet people all the time who say, man, I got this idea. I'm obsessed with it. It's so good. And I look at it and I go, you cannot get emotionally attached to this one problem you want to solve because you become blind to the obvious problems of it. Because when you bring in those the in and out of industry experts to come in and look at this thing, and they tell you, here's why your idea is going to fail, you should freaking listen to them and find another problem. And eventually you'll find a problem that you go and talk to an expert about, and they're like, holy shit, that's amazing, right? And that's the problem that you want to, go out and solve. Not, and like, this, like the stupid half suit, the partly proper thing. So many people told me, here's the problems with it. And I ignored all of them because I was excited about it because it helped me personally.
There's another side of this,
money.
though. There's another side of this, though. There's a guy named Mike Maples Jr. of, he's like the 3rd or 4th largest PE in the world, right? He's got a fantastic podcast. Please run, don't walk, go watch it. And he always said, I think he was an early investor in Twitter, but he always said that his investment, when he buys a company or invests in a company, it's this kind of shared secret that only both of them understand that the world hasn't seen yet, right? And this is the exact opposite of what you're saying, but it's for a very small percentage, right, of the actual companies out there.
I mean, so everybody's an expert at something and they don't realize it. This is the thing that really blows my mind is everyone's like, oh, I don't know anything. I'm just a stay-at-home mom or something. And I'm just like, you know how much I learned when I became a parent? Like how much stuff I didn't know? Like if you are an expert at being a stay-at-home parent, look around you. What problems are endemic, expensive, and established? And if you've got the skills to be a salesperson and pick up the phone and start selling others on solving the problem for you, and you're just connecting that tissue, then great, you're going to make a lot of money, right? I mean, so you mentioned like the idea that your ideas, the concept that your ideas are not worth as much as, like we talked about this idea, right? Signing NDAs for this idea that maybe not go anywhere. When I started the instant payroll project with Signature Bank, I knew one guy I really wanted to talk to. His name is, you might know him, he's a billionaire. His name is Steve Sarowitz. He's the owner of Paylocity, or the founder of Paylocity. Steve Sarowitz had a payroll bureau licensing, I believe it was Millennium Software from MPay. And then he ended up starting his own technology stack, and that became Paylocity. And then he sold it for $1 billion and went public and all that kind of stuff. And now he runs a movie studio, Wayfarer Studios. He made the Garfield movie, right? Like this guy, he knows how to print money. And I had this idea for instant payroll, and I was so scared to share that idea with him because I thought to myself, this man has every skill in this niche world imaginable to take my idea and do it without me. He is the most well-positioned person on this planet to do this without me. So I hid it from him. I didn't consult him, and I launched it. And then I called him later and I said, hey, I want to talk to you about this idea. Because in this case, he also had a company doing international payroll. I thought maybe we could use it for that. And I said, maybe I should talk to him and get his opinion. And he answered the phone. And the first thing he says to me is, and by the way, let me talk about how I got him on the phone for like a hot second, because this is something to point out. When I mentioned salespeople have a superpower, I got a billionaire on the phone. How did I do that? He gave me his cell phone number when I worked for him back before he was a billionaire. And I just kept it in my phone book. And I had the nerve to call his cell phone number from 15 years ago. And he picked up and he said, oh, I remember you. That was it. It's so easy. Just pick up the phone and call people. I called the front desk of a publicly traded bank. And by the way, Greg Tamberlane is the son of one of the founders. He's like at the tippy top of this bank, of this, 3,000 employee bank. I just called the front desk and said, can I talk to Greg? Guess what? You sure can. It's shocking how often that works. All right, back to Steve Sarowitz. So I called Steve Sarowitz. I said, hey, Steve, I've got this idea, blockchain payroll. I've launched it with Signature Bank. What do you think? And he said, John, I am so tired of payroll. I'm all in on this movie thing. He said, look, this is a secret. Don't tell anyone. But I'm selling my other payroll company in like a month. It's going to be gone. I'm not going to be involved in it anymore. Here's the people you can call. Bye. And I realized in that moment, and by the way, Steve's great. I ended up seeing him again later, but Steve's great. And what I realized is because I'm excited about an idea, sharing the idea doesn't get other people excited about the idea. Just the information dump of here's what I'm doing. This guy's got his own shit going on. He's a busy guy with his own dreams. And that's true for every person in your life that you interact with. What's fun about this idea of calling an industry expert. Let's say you've got an idea to fix diaper changing beds because you're a stay-at-home mom. I keep going back to that one. You know, you've left the sales industry and now you're a stay-at-home mom. I'm going to fix diaper changing stations because they're terrible. This was an actual idea I had, by the way. We're going to fix it, right? And you want to call someone and find out if your idea is good or not. And you call someone established in this industry that maybe knows manufacturing for baby beds. You can just like Google like who's like, you can look at the bottom of your baby bed, figure out who the company is, call the front desk and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody. And you call them and you say, let's say it's someone named Bob. Hey, Bob, I love your company, everything you're doing. I'm a customer of yours. I want to learn more about it. I have this idea I'm working on, and I was wondering, I'd love to have you coach me on this. Would you be willing to share your expertise? You're just calling someone and saying, hey, this thing you're passionate about and you spend 8 hours a day, every day thinking about.
And then I recognize you're an expert in, and I see you're being the guy, the person who's the expert in the entire world, and I'm asking you for your help. You're damn right.
Oh, that guy won't shut up. He's going to say, he's going to say, oh my God. You know, it's funny when I went to start, I mean, heck, I called a payroll company to start the reason I started my payroll company is because I called my competitor and he said, you should join us, be a competitor. It's great. I love this thing I do. And you should do it too. And you should love it too. Right. So you can call these experts and tell them, I recognize you're an expert. I look up to you. I wish I knew as much as you did. Would you be willing to mentor me for an afternoon or for an hour, for a 30-minute phone call? And they will tell you everything. The world is not full of secrets. It's full of people who can't wait to talk to you if you pick up the phone, especially if you're not calling to actually sell them anything. You're calling to just find things out. People love curiosity. There's a guy who I love to death. His name is Brad Garner. He's a sales coach himself. And if you need sales advice, talk to Brad Garner. That guy's a rock star. And Brad Garner probably took this from somewhere or came up with it himself. But he has this phrase that he trained all the sales reps that worked under him to say, which is, I'm curious. You know, when you're in a needs analysis, when you're cold calling someone, just saying, Scott, I'm curious. Why is this a thing in your world, right? That phrase of curiosity just inspires people to talk. And if you're trying to get someone to open up, I'm curious, I don't understand this, right? Explain it to me. People love to explain their world to you because
I think it's a way of asking permission, though. I think it's a way of expressly asking and then executing immediately after saying it, right? It's not it's almost like it's a bridge between the thing you want and the thing you're trying to get. I'm curious to simply that little bridge or whatever. I have also used, I'm curious about why you would do this or why you would do that. Please continue. Brad, what's his last name?
Brad Garner. Oh my gosh, I love Brad. Yeah, he's been a sales leader for years. He spearheaded Paylocity sales operation, helped them become
the Garner Group.
Oh man, I think that's him. He's going to kill me for not remembering. I know he works directly for a company right now, but he's just a person in my life. I think he works for Krista, which Krista is a really interesting company in the AI space. A lot of my old Paylocity friends ended up there. I have good things to say about that company as well. But you know, he's one of those people that I think really shaped the way I view sales. And that's true for, a lot of people I've interacted with in my sales life I try to learn from them anyway. But this idea of, what is that book? I can't remember the name of it. It's How to Make Friends and what is it? How to Make Friends and Influence People. Yeah. You know, that book has a concept in it about the idea of like, just really, I think one of the concepts that you can boil down, if you like distill that book into its very basic, like one sentence meaning, a lot of it is, talk to people about themselves, like let them talk about themselves. And they just instantly trust and like you a little bit. Right. And that question, I'm curious, tell me about it. When you call these people out of the blue to learn about their industries, to see if there's a market opportunity there, or even if they're a competitor of yours in the future, by posing this question is, I want to learn, and giving them the opportunity to talk about something they're passionate about, they're going to like you. When my wife is an introvert, she hides. So she's my co-founder, and she and I run the business together, and you will probably never see her on a video call. You'll be lucky if you hear her beautiful voice on the phone, right? And because she's shy, right? And that's okay. We found peace in that. And it's funny because she joined me in launching HireWith because of desperation, right? We just lost our income stream, right? We had to do this, right? And we called all these people I knew. And the first people I called were my old clients at Signature Bank. Like, hey, I'm launching this new thing. And the call wasn't, I'm here to sell you it. It was, am I losing my mind? Is this an actual opportunity? And would you want to be a part of it? And what should I do? What should my contracts look like? What would you be willing to pay? Like, these are hard questions. And we hopped on the phone with one of our customers that wasn't a customer yet. And Maria was on the call to learn with me. And we hung up the phone, and she looked at me and she said, John, They were so nice.
Yeah, everybody's not. Most people are nice when you ask questions, right?
Everyone is
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, everyone's nice. Yeah,
Everyone's
and the
so
occasional
scared.
jackass the occasional jackass, right? Still makes the occasional jackass. The 1 in 20, who gives a shit? Screw them. Go to the next one. It's fine.
Absolutely. And even if they are a jackass, what it means is like, I mean, I'll be honest. There's days when I'm a jackass to people. I don't mean to be, right? We've all had those days where like something's gone horribly wrong with your day. There's like a vendor that's owes you money and it's not working, and then a sales rep calls you at the wrong time when you've got your two kids yelling at you in the back seat because you had to take them to the doctor because on top of all the shit at work, your kids both have strep, right? Like that happens in life, right? And then some sales rep calls you and says, "Oh, I want to talk to you about your payroll processor." You think I'm going to be like super, super cordial? I'm like, I'm not interested. I got to go. Right. And so the thing about when people are assholes to salespeople is, and I used to have a process as a sales rep where I would call them back a quarter later, and 9 out of 10 times they would
They're
not remember
guilty about
me
it.
at all.
Oh, or
No, they're
they
not
feel
guilty
guilty
about
about
it.
being a jackass. Okay, or they feel guilty about being
No,
a jackass. Okay,
it's actually, I would disagree, Scott. They don't remember you. And I bring this up because that is a good thing. You want to be memorable when you've got, like, you become memorable when you have something that they latch onto as a valuable product. But if they just hung up on you because you called or knocked on their door and they didn't like it. When I was a sales rep for Paychecks, I had to go knock on doors. They called it cloverleafing. You do a sales appointment and you go knock on the businesses around it, cloverleafing. It's a classic entry-level sales thing you have to do. If you've ever had someone knock on your door selling you bug spray, that's cloverleafing, baby. So I was knocking on doors and I walked into an aquarium store in Florida. It was the most beautiful fish and aquarium setups I've ever seen in my life. And the guy's talking to a customer. Now, am I going to go be like, "Excuse me, customer, get out of the way. I'm here to sell"? No, I'm not going to do that. So I'm looking at his fish, I'm just standing there. And I had an aquarium at home. And the guy finishes and I say, "Oh my God, this fish tank is beautiful. What kind of fish are these? Like, how do you keep these guys going like this?" Right. And then, we chat, and then I said, "Anyway, I'm here to sell you payroll. I'm with Paychecks, blah, 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 blah." And he said, "I'm not interested. See you later." We get an inbound lead month later, same guy. And my manager's shadowing me that day. And so my manager joins me on this drive. We drive back to this guy's place and we sit down and we start talking. And about 10 minutes in, he said, "You guys are just the nicest fellas. You won't believe this, but some asshole from your company came in here a month ago and said, 'Oh, I love your fish,' and was bullshitting me about my fish as if he knew anything about fish. I don't know what happened to that guy, but you guys are great." And I'm like, "Oh, that was me." That was me, man. But like, they don't remember you because hundreds of
yeah,
people walk in that door every day. It's why
yeah,
they're in business. And,
right.
and like, some people might be upset by that. But I think there is this myth in a lot of people's heads that the world revolves around them. And the answer is the world revolves around yourself. And that's true for everyone in this world. The world around your world revolves around Scott, and that's okay. But knowing that means that you can do a lot to bump into people's worlds. And if they reject you, you haven't entered their world. They don't know you. Unless you made a really bad impression, unless you really did. So that's why, like, pushy sales reps are shooting themselves in the foot, because the sooner you can turn tail and get out of their circle, that gives you a chance to come back and try again 6 months later. But if you keep pushing into their world and they don't want you in their world, you've now made an impression. They're going to remember you now.
You raise their consciousness right above a threshold where they go, "Okay, I remember you now, jackass." Right, and it's a completely different kind of sales cycle, or
Well,
not
I mean,
effective.
everyone out there is. Let me ask you this, Scott. Think back on the last 7 days of your life. How much, if you had to add up the hour, like percentage wise, how much is going to be a memory of yours in a year, percentage wise? Because
5%,
you're on
10%,
you,
maybe
you and
less.
everyone else. I mean, for me, it's going to be like 5% at most, because we're on autopilot. We've got the same tasks we got to do every day. We got the same response. I take my kid to the bus every morning. Yeah, okay, we had a really magical moment in the cul-de-sac. All right, great. That's going to stick in my mind. But everything else was repeated. It was just over and over again, right? Unless I took a picture. And so because of that, if you're a sales rep and you're walking into someone's 95% that they're not retaining, the goal is not to pay attention to you. The goal is to talk to them while they're sleepwalking, find out if they're a viable prospect. And if they are, come back and wake them up when they're ready. You know?
I like that. It's interesting. I have I mean, I could talk to you for like 10 hours because I mean I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. It's just every time I turn around, every time you speak, there's some little nugget that I never thought of being as a thing, but it seems like it's absolutely right in front of my face the entire time, and I just never noticed it. Right? I never. No, of course not. Of course, 5% of the things I'll actually be committed along my hippocampus, and then what, a month from now I'll go to my long-term memory, probably maybe 5%. Right? So of course you're like, remember that person who called me. I mean, I got called. A sales guy called me last week. I don't remember a single detail. I just remember that they
No
called.
idea.
I don't have a single detail of what they asked me or whatever. I didn't retain any of it.
So here's the secret, Scott. That guy can call you back in 3 months and say,
Yeah.
Scott,
I
it's
will
me,
never know he
JMS.
called. Right.
You and I spoke like 3 months ago. You told me to call you back in 3 months. I just wanted to chat with you for a little bit.
Did
And you know
Maybe
what?
I did. Right.
You don't even know if that's true. You don't know if it's true. And you know what? You'll probably, and now, by the way, I'm not encouraging salespeople to lie about this. That's a terrible plan. But but here's the thing. When people told me as a sales rep to like call back in 3 months or 6 months, guess what? I did it. I know that sounds shocking, but like I've met so many sales reps. I remember this guy. I won't name him because the story's not flattering. He was a Paylocity sales rep who didn't last very long. And I sat down with him at a Panera Bread because we didn't have an office in the state of Virginia. So I don't want to meet him in my house. So let's go to Panera. And I said, hey, how was your morning? He said, oh man, I got so much done. I said, yeah, what'd you do? He said, well, I telemarketed all day. I said, oh, great. How many calls did you make? I made 10. Now, my average telemarketing session was about 100 calls. So I'm like,
I was about to say 70 to 100.
Yeah. So like, why? I said, what happened? Why did it take you so long? You were 4 hours. Like it takes like 10 seconds to call and get a busy tone and hang up. Like, what are you doing? And he said, well, what I actually said to him was, show me your process. Like, show me what you're doing. And he said, well, first I'd go to the company website and I'd look up their board of directors and I'd find all the names of the top leadership. And then I'd load this into CRM. And then I would look up, I try to go to their login page and figure out what software technology stacks they'd use and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, dude, what happens when you called that guy? They didn't answer. Yeah. So what was the point of all that research? Nothing.
Move him to CRM once you talk to him if that's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, and so like when I left Paylocity after 8 years of working, my sales territory hadn't changed too terribly much, and I was calling the same people for 10 years, right? Because there's only so many leads. And so at the end of it, my entire telemarketing sessions were not calling down a list of new businesses I'd never heard of. It was calling back people who said, call me back in 6 months, call me back in a year, call me back in a quarter, call me back in whatever. And so everyone I called, the call went like this. It was basically, hey, Scott, it's JMS. I talked to you like 6 months ago. I want to see if the timing is right. Can I pop in and say hi to you? I want to just come by and just catch up with you and shoot the breeze. And like, shockingly, people would say yes to that. Even if they weren't like, oh, sure, let's see what you got to say. You seem like a nice enough fella. And there was familiarity because they've heard my name every 6 months, like clockwork. I broke through their bubble. And eventually they said, you know what? It's funny. We were told to reduce costs. Now's the time. Let's see if we can revisit our cost structure, see what's going on here. Like every now and again, it'd be the right time. Just funny how that works,
Yeah,
but
I know, but
say
it's also
all of this
stacking that up, right? You'll start that. So 6 months plus 1 day, you do that 20 or 50 times in a day. In 6 months, you literally have 20 callbacks you could do every day. Right. I know it's a long game. It's a long game. Right. But so is sales. A complicated, highly technical sale is a long sale.
I got to say, Scott, my success didn't come from pounding the phones. My success comes from and came from finding strategic partners. When I was a Paylocity rep, they tasked us with this idea. I don't know if it was all Brad Garner's idea, but I know he had a lot to do with they had this pitch deck they called the Trojan horse. Oh God, this pitch deck, it was unbelievable. And Brad made this, the Trojan horse. And this pitch deck was designed to go after health insurance agents because health insurance agents and financial advisors, they sell 401ks and health, their benefits, they're products that don't compete against us. They're tangential. My competitors, ADP and Paychex at the time, sold those products directly. Our company didn't have that offering. So we would call the people and say, your enemy is my enemy. Let's be friends. Introduce me to all the people you sold 401ks to. Because if you don't, I promise you their payroll vendors can be knocking on their door trying to get you fired, right? And we had all these stats about how, now, did I offer them a revenue share or pay them anything? No. So you get those guys, you save 1 or 2 accounts for them. And then next thing you know, they're calling all the time. And we had the best thing ever, the Affordable Care Act. Oh my God. The Affordable Care Act came out. And the reason it was amazing for us was because it involved doing a special payroll tax return, which is exciting. I get to talk about it. And then if you were a health insurance agent during that time, all of a sudden, a lot of companies who didn't have health insurance had to get it. It was required by the government, or they called it pay or play. You either get the insurance, you play the game, or you pay a penalty fee. So they were bringing me in as their expert. I became a niche expert on the ACA and the requirements that you had to do, because I knew all the tax stuff. They trained us at Paylocity. Here's all the stuff you have to do for the Affordable Care Act. You got to monitor full-time employees. You got to track the percentage of their income that's a deduction for health insurance versus not. That's all stuff in payroll. These health insurance guys don't give a crap about that. They just want to look at premiums, right? So they had me being the niche. So I went out and I sold all this. And then the best thing ever happened, which was my competitors, ADP and Paychex, got money in their eyes, the fox, the wolf with the monies for eyes, and the tongue falls out. And they said, oh my God, we could be the ones selling health insurance right now. And so they decided to hold some of these tax returns and reports hostage and would only give it to their clients if they signed up for health insurance. So I printed off the sales page on the website for Paychex and ADP that had the little asterisk that said, for the most comprehensive service, switch your health insurance to Paychex. Switch your health insurance to ADP. And I printed that off and I went into every health insurance agency in my community and I put that on the desk in front of them and said, did you know that all of your Paychex clients right now are being told that they only get Affordable Care Act support if they fire you? Did you know that? Do you want me to go talk to them and tell them not to do it? For free. Do it for free. Right? So like,
man.
It's sticky niches, man. And so like, we talk about telemarketing, but like, the hard part in that skill cycle was having the confidence to go knock on the door and pick up the phone and call a health broker who doesn't give a shit about payroll. Pardon my language. Hopefully I can curse on here, but like, it doesn't care about payroll. It doesn't care about any of this. Right. And now you fast forward to today, Affordable Care Act is in the rearview mirror and every other payroll company out there has figured out, we got to start being in front of these 401k and health insurance guys because we're losing business left and right by not being friends with them. All right. So the world's changing and there's a new niche. Every year there's a new thing that you can corner in your market. And that's why I talk about this sticky niches process, this little 4-step process. It's repeatable because every time you come up with a little idea, you start asking yourself, is this endemic, established, expensive? You go and you call an expert and say, am I full of shit here? Or is there something here? And then you just bring those people together and make it your corner of the world. It's repeatable. The secret is giving up quickly and walking away when it becomes clear. It's not getting emotional on an idea. It's going out and finding out, is there value here? And if there is, talking to others about it, and it's why, to the point you brought up earlier, salespeople are superheroes because we are the chosen few who have the ability to pick up the phone and call a stranger and have that uncomfortable conversation of, man, I don't know your world, but I think I see something interesting there. Can you just tell me everything about it? And here's my idea. Is it crazy? And if you go to that same person and say, Scott, you know what? I have this amazing idea. It's so good that I need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. I don't trust you. I think you're my competitor, Scott. I don't trust you. You think Scott's going to tell me anything after that? He's going to be, what you're doing is you're telling him, hey, this idea is so good, you should consider doing it. And 9 times out of 10, when someone asks me to sign an NDA to share an idea with me, they then, to your point, Scott, give me the dumbest idea. And the reason it's dumb is because I know about that topic so well that I can see that it's dumb and they don't. And if they, instead of approaching me with an NDA, came to me and said, here's this idea that I'm thinking might have potential, tell me about your world, they would have learned for themselves that it's a dumb idea and they wouldn't have been wasting their time on it.
John, we are out of time. I could talk to you for 5 more hours and I really kind of want to. So.
I'm sorry.
I really dig the insight, that I don't necessarily get from a lot of people, only because they're kind of tunnel visioned, and you're not just necessarily a jack of all trades so much as you are. It doesn't really matter what the jack or the trade or any of that. You're just looking for the vacuum, looking for the missing hole.
I'm a sales guy and an entrepreneur. I'm not just HireWith, I think is the point. But if you want to go there, HireWith.com or HireWith.us, they both go to the same place. You're welcome to poke around.
We'll add all those links to the bottom of this episode. John, it was awesome talking to you. And stay on for a little bit longer after I hit stop, because I'd like to talk to you for a bit more.
Yeah, Scott, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.